But the root cause here is a long-term change in the distribution of the gains of productivity. For 30 years, the distribution stopped for the working class. They stayed the same. Real wages roughly now what they were in the late 70s. Productivity rose. It's because that distribution split and how the two sides reacted to it that we are in a very deep crisis itself. And since the productivity numbers are continuing and the real wage numbers are continuing, absolutely nothing exists in this economy that would make one think that we're out of the woods or that anything fundamental has changed in that set of circumstances that produced the crisis. This is a crisis of a system that works this way, that has worked this way before. As the opening speaker said, the only really remarkable thing, or maybe I'm taking it a step further, the only really remarkable thing about a dysfunctional system that is now experiencing the second major collapse in 75 years, the last being in the great 1930s, and that had roughly a dozen downturns between the end of the 1930 depression and the one now, that such a dysfunctional, unstable system could survive critical scrutiny tells us more about us than about the system. It is really an extraordinary exercise in self-imposed blindness that we don't have regular commitments to having in every curriculum of every economics program a core portion devoted to the criticisms of capitalism, of its instability, of its normal functioning, of how and why it could evolve in this direction. And since the largest repository, now 150 years old, of collective efforts to produce a critique of capitalism, which goes by the name of the Marxian tradition, ought to be a core part of that curriculum. And if nothing else happens out of this crisis, as the opening speaker said, it ought to be a recognition of the insights the Marxian tradition has to offer and the absurdity of those not being part of the educational process of people trying to cope with this crisis. Thank you very much.